And we're live. Hello. Live on the internet. Welcome. My name is Martin. I'm part of the team here at REEDSY, welcoming you to another REEDSY Live, our ongoing series of webinars where we show folks how to write and publish better books. If you're tuning in today and you've clicked the video of your own volition, you probably know what the deal is. We're having another one of our live editing sessions with REEDSY's Head of Learning, Tom Bromley. We'll be kicking that off in just a few minutes, but while we wait for the hour to tick around, just let us know where you're coming from today. And city, country, well, I can try guess where it is. Hello, Glenn Taylor says hello, Martin. Lee Sneath we have there from Dallas, Texas. Let's scroll a bit further back up. Alana from Edmonton, Alberta. What Lisa likes from the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Christy from Savannah, which I imagine is Georgia. Chris from Sydney, Australia. I believe it's like 5 or 6 there, so thank you very much for tuning in. Nura Uruji from South Africa, fantastic. Pat Fitzpatrick, Patricia from Spain, hola. Loving life day by day, hello from Montana. Jackie's there from Glasgow. We have James Gosfiler, who says, Muhammad Ali. I assume that was in response to a question on the chat, rather than you are currently in the state of Muhammad Ali. We have Gil from Atlanta. Oh, another Georgian there. Susan from Virginia in the USA, and Jackie from Queensland, Australia. Great to see so many people turning up. As I mentioned, we'll be going live in just a few minutes, but this is the very casual pre-presentation hangout. I'll take care of a bit of housekeeping while we're here and while we're waiting. Last week I sent out a newsletter from REEDSY asking people to send in probably the first chapter of their books. We said about 500 words. And from that, we have picked a handful for our head of learning, Tom, who's an editor, who's an author, who'll be editing it for you live, right in front of your very eyes here on our live stream. The whole purpose of this is to give you an idea of how an editor goes about reading a piece of work, how they might go about correcting it, prodding you in the right direction, giving you an idea of what works on the page, and how you can progress and rewrite and edit your own work. So I'm really glad we had so many submissions. As I mentioned in the reminder email today, we had close to 2,000 submissions. So if we spent, 5 minutes covering each one, 5 times 2,000, that'll be 10,000 minutes, divide that by 60. That'll be 166 hours divided by 24. I guess it would be feasible in just under a week. So I guess we better get started very soon. But yeah, those who sent it in who don't feature will, of course, delete them all as soon as this is done. But we really appreciate you sending in all your hard work. However, it's now the top of the hour. I'm going to see if I can play our intro sequence and get this thing started. I'll see you all in just 1 second. Hello, and welcome to REEDSY Live. My name is Martin, I'm your host, and weekly... I've already fluffed that one up. I thought I was going to do this all professional-like. Welcome to REEDSY Live, our ongoing series of webinars where we bring on professionals from the world of publishing to show you how to write and publish better books. Today we have a very special live editing session, the third of its kind. We ask people to send in 500 words from their book, probably the first 500, and our guest is going to edit it, or comment on it, or mark it up live in front of your very eyes. Well, we've already had a lot of ado just before the stream started, so without more of it, let me please introduce my guest. I've written some notes about them, and here we are. My guest is the head of learning at REEDSY. In his storied career, he has been an editor, publisher, and ghostwriter. You will know him best, however, as the author of The One and Only, Half the World Away, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and I presume other books titled after top 40 hits. Please welcome Tom Bromley. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you, Martin?
Yeah, not bad. I was trying to look for some sort of vague Tom Bromley trivia, and I noticed that a bunch of your books are named after popular songs. Is that something that was conscious, or is that something like, if you're sort of stuck for anything, just pick a song title?
I think song titles are always good, and there's no copyright on song titles as well. It's always a good thing to know. So yeah, that's always a useful thing to have in the back of mind. No, I think I think those books are all music related in some way as well. So it made sense to have a kind of musicy theme in the title too.
Yeah, you always run. We have the prompts competition at Reedsy every Friday, and we always, the people who run it, Laura and the team, always trying to think up a pithy title, and they've done so many of them that just about every available Shakespeare quote or bon mot has been taken already. So maybe it's
Okay,
time for us to move on to more song titles.
yeah, from
Um,
Shakespeare to popular culture, I think it's time to shift. I think.
yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you choose a Shakespeare quote, it makes your work like instantly 50% classier.
I think that's where I've gone wrong in my career, probably.
Cool. Well, I'm really glad you could join us for this. Tom is, of course, our head of learning who runs our novel writing course. A new term of that is about to start on May 20th.
That's right. Next Monday.
Fantastic. Yes, and just as a bit of a preview to that, and just to remind everyone of that, he's kindly agreed to come on and run one of his live editing sessions that he does on the regular with the students of that course there. Yeah, before we get started, Tom, would you like to tell us what folks can sort of expect from this particular session and what they should keep their eye out for?
Yeah, so this is a regular part of the course. So we have a live session every Monday night. Sometimes we have a guest author. Sometimes I'm doing a masterclass, and every few weeks we have a live editing session where I critique the work of a number of students. And I think it's one of those strange things. I think feedbacking is so important when you're writing and learning to write. But what's always interesting is you can learn a lot from how other people's work is critiqued, and then you can feed that back into your own work. So although the comments I'm going to make this evening will be particularly useful to those writers I'm critiquing, hopefully there will be takeaways that everyone watching can use and apply to their own writing, and that's the point of the sessions. And also I think it's just quite useful generally to see how an editor would approach a text as well. So I still do bits and bobs of editing for kind of various people, and I think it's quite instructive to see how they approach the text in a different way, perhaps to maybe an author or a writer would.
Yeah, it's always very exciting. I think a lot of new writers kind of dread to see what an editor will do to their work. But most of the time, they're working with you or for you, so it's probably not in their interest to completely savage your work and stamp on your dreams. I think most of the people I know who have worked with an editor have enjoyed the process.
I mean, the point of editing is to make better what is there in the text. So it's thinking about what is this book about, what is at its heart, how can I help the author improve that. That's what editing should be about. It's bringing about the main points in the story and with the characters. That's what the focus should be.
Great. Let's cut the fluff out of this introduction and get straight to chapter one, shall we?
Absolutely. So we're going to look at kind of four pieces in particular this evening, and I've tried to choose a variety of kind of different genres because I think it's quite useful to see how books work in different areas. And the first piece I've chosen is a piece called Kingdom of Mayhem, which is a romance fantasy or romantasy, I guess, by Marie B. Tavone. And as with all the pieces, what I'm going to do is to read the extract out first, and I'm going to go through my critique and how I would edit the material. Sunlight danced off the diamond-studded bodice of the last gown she would ever wear. White was a fitting colour. Some women wore it to the altar. Harper would wear it to the grave. The sunlight's searing reflection threatened to blind her, adding to the pain already building behind her eyes. A pain born from lack of sleep, little appetite, and a suffocating anxiety that heightened with every minute that passed. Harper turned out of the sun's rays, noting how the gossamer sections of the skirt rustled with her movement. She reached up and toyed with a heart-shaped pearl sewn alongside the diamonds. Like the skirt, the bodice of her gown was gossamer, but layered in heavier folds along a sweetheart neckline. Harper looked herself over in the mirror for the 100th time. The all-white ensemble, a symbol of her virtue, made her feel ethereal. Her skin's pallor added to the waif-like image. Large green eyes popped out of an ashen face, free of any makeup. Her normal dark pink lips drained of colour. Even her hair appeared limp and stringy. The only vibrancy arose from the pink and yellow flowers she had woven through her hair, a homage to her beloved gardens, the only pleasure afforded to her in her overly regulated life. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed the hour, making her jump. Harper swallowed, swearing she could hear the seconds ticking by, swore they were speeding up. A reminder the inevitable was no longer creeping towards her, but instead sprinted at her, straight on. Harper had been groomed for today since the Queen found her in that alley all those years ago, and realised that she was the answer to a prophecy. Her entire existence centred around this one act of foretold sacrifice for people. Harper had devoted hours, days of thought to how she would react on this day. Every possibility, from running and screaming in terror to holding her chin high with pride, had gone through her mind. And yet she found only the numbness that overwhelming anxiety can bring, anxiety that has saturated every nerve ending. Brief hints of pride and satisfaction that her people would finally be safe eddied beneath that anxiety. But the most prominent feeling bobbing through the numbness was regret. Regret for all the unspoken questions and for a life never lived. Harper inhaled, held, and then released, hoping to calm the bitterness in her stomach. The sourness of her bile already burned the back of her throat. The door clicked open behind her, drawing her attention in the mirror. The Queen of the Kingdom of Virtue entered, a smile spreading across her face as she looked Harper over. The Queen's own white dress, form-fitting and regal, highlighted her station. Instead of gossamer, however, the Queen was draped in satin, with tiny red hearts interspersed over her bodice, while bright diamonds scattered over the skirt. An equal representation of her two courts, the Court of Hearts and the Court of Diamonds. Okay, so this is a text and a beginning. This is a hugely popular and growing kind of genre, so it's a really interesting kind of area to write in. And I think there's a lot in here for Marie to be pleased with how this is set up. I think the most important thing is grounding this character, Harper, who's at the centre of the piece. I think that's really, really important. And secondly, getting that question that I always talk about with beginnings, the why now, and we have this here that she's, we've got this moment, this day has come, this is all about the prophecy. So you've got that little bit of story in there as well into the mix. I would say that I think the story's a little bit buried down. So if you look here at the beginning, it's only when we go down to the second half of this opening page where we have this paragraph here. Harper had been groomed for today since the Queen found her in that alley all those years ago and realised she was the answer to a prophecy. So this is the sort of the big reveal, the crucial moment in this opening page. And I think possibly this comes a little bit late for the reader. I think this probably needs to be slightly higher up in the mix, because what we've got up to this point is more about description. It's about grounding the reader with this particular character, but the story is kind of held back a little bit. So in terms of getting things up and running, I think probably you need a little bit more in there a little bit earlier on. I think it's hinted at in this opening paragraph where we've got the sunlight dancing, we've got the white being a fitting colour, some women wore it to the altar, Harper would wear it to the grave. So we know here that something ominous is happening, but we don't know the why or the what or what that's about. So we've had a hint at the start, but it's not as not as shown as strongly or as quickly as I think it probably needs to do to get it up and running. I want to talk about a couple of points here at the beginning, and I think these first three paragraphs in particular are quite instructive. And you can see as I'm just marking down the side of the page how the text is getting longer each paragraph as the piece goes on. And what this is having an effect of doing is that it's slowing the pace down as it's going through. We do a session on the course about paragraphs and paragraph lengths, and generally the shorter the paragraphs, the quicker the pace. So when you've got a section like this where the paragraphs are getting consistently longer, that is slowing things down. And I don't know necessarily whether that's the right thing to do at this point. It may be actually that you start with something shorter and then you then carry on with slightly longer paragraphs and mix it up a little bit more. I think this way of doing it slows things down a touch. But one of the techniques that Marie uses, which I think is really important, a really useful thing writing wise, is this idea of the rule of three. That there's this theory that when you have a list or a sequence, or you have a number of elements, there's something about that third element that has emphasis. And if you look in this opening paragraph, we've got a really, really good example of this. White was a fitting colour. 1, some woman wore it to the altar. 2, Harper would wear it to the grave. 3. And so it's that third one that has the emphasis. And I think what I also like here a lot actually is this use of the final word in each sentence. So that is the one that's having the having the impact. It's thinking about where that key detail lands. So I think structurally this is set out kind of really, really nicely. And I think this use of the rule of three as a technique is something that I would look at employing when you're using or trying to create a piece for emphasis, or there's a particular point you want to bring out. I would say, however, that the same kind of technique is used again in this second paragraph. So in the second sentence here, we have a pain born from a lack of sleep, little appetite, and a suffocating anxiety that heightened with every minute that passed. So here you've got the same structure repeated. And I think because you've got it twice in quick succession, it dulls the impact a little bit. So we do a week on the course where we talk about kind of techniques for emphasis, and generally as a writing tool. The more you use these techniques, the less impact they have. So use them sparingly and for effect. And here, I think both uses are well done, but having them so quickly together just gets in the way of each other. So I'd probably have the one at the beginning, which I think is really strong, and I would tweak that second one there. The other slightly different, it's not really a rule of three, but there is something repeated 3 times that you may have noticed, is this detail about the sunlight. So we have the sunlight dancing off the bodice at the start of the first paragraph. Then we have the sunlight searing reflection at the start of the second paragraph. And we have Harper turned out of the sun rays at the start of the third paragraph. And I think the start of a paragraph is also kind of really, really important. So to repeat this here, which I don't think is particularly be done for effect or emphasis, I would change that we're coming back around to this same little bit of detail, and that repetition just gets in the way a little bit. So I would mix that up a little bit more probably than the author is doing here at the moment. I would add here as well is that we probably for this kind of book need a little bit more detail about the setting. So we've got some lovely detail in this next paragraph about the dress that she's wearing. We then have some good detail on this use of the mirror, which is always a nice technique in the fourth paragraph. So by the end of this opening section, we've got a good sense of what this person looks like, but we don't have as much about the story as I think we need probably, and as much about the location. So I think bringing those 2 elements in this opening, I think would be extremely useful and extremely helpful. And then, as I say, this little bit of story we need to bring in a little bit more. And the other thing, which I think is really crucial, particularly when you're launching a protagonist at the start, is bringing in that little bit of emotion and feeling. And we don't get very much in the first half of the page. We get a little bit more down here, and I think it's slightly confusing because we talk about this numbness. She found out the numbness that overwhelming anxiety can bring, but then she also has regret. Bobbing through the numbness was regret. And I think if you're numb, I think it's quite hard to have regret or another feeling as well. You're either numb or you're not. So I think that probably needs tweaking a little bit. But this instinct here to bring in the emotion at this point is good. But again, I think along with the story, I would bring that in a little bit earlier. But there's masses in here to be pleased with. There's some really good kind of writing techniques going on here. And so I think a really strong beginning for what is a really exciting genre to be writing in at the moment.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's an interesting thing about genre, because I suppose, a well-told story is a well-told story, but would you say that the genre in which you're writing will have an impact on how you tell the story, or are there sort of expectations that a reader might have that you should ideally work towards?
I think it depends a little bit on the genre. So I think if you're writing, for example, a crime book, the normal theory with crime is you need your body by the end of chapter 1. So if you're having a crime story and there's not a murder early on, then probably that's not the expectations of the genre that you're writing in. I think if you're writing anything related with fantasy or kind of science fiction, anywhere where the world is slightly different to our own. Historical fiction, I'll probably add into that as well. I think you need to set that stall out quite early on and do that little bit of world building to kind of get the reader in and ground them so they're not worrying about where they are or what's going on. But it varies from one to one. I interviewed a writer called Dugald Bruce Lockhart last night for the course, who's a thriller writer. And actually, we discussed that. And I think he sort of was saying that when you're writing a thriller, there aren't particularly any kind of rules or restrictions that he felt he needed to kind of fit the story around. So I think it depends a little bit on the genre that you're working in. But yeah, I think we're going to look at a romance piece later on, which again I think really fulfills the form that you need for that particular genre. But yeah, some genres have more rules and expectations than others, I would say.
Yeah, I suppose ultimately, so long as the reader cares and they aren't bored, then they're willing to go along with however you start your story, probably.
Yeah, I think the challenge with beginnings is you have to kind of hit the ground running from a standing start, and that's not easy. You have to give the reader enough stuff about the characters you're writing about to care about them, but you can't slow it down to give them too much detail because you've got to get the thing moving at the same time, and that is a really difficult balancing act to kind of pull off for sure. It always feels slightly hard to me, or slightly harsh on new writers, that you're beginning the piece with technically one of the most difficult bits of the novel to write and get right. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Would you usually
that's
suggest to anyone that they maybe start with chapter two?
not necessarily. I think you I think with your first draft you get something down, but quite often the beginning is something you will go back and rewrite later on once you've got a better idea of the story. So I wouldn't worry about getting the beginning perfect at the beginning. Just get something down and get the thing moving. But it's certainly a piece that you are quite likely to go back to and refine as the editing and the rewriting goes on.
All right, cool. I've noticed we have almost 1,000 people watching, but only I think 90 likes for this video. It really helps us out. Every bit of interaction you have here. So if you can give this thing a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to Reedsy YouTube channel. We put out great new content every single week, and you'll be the first to know when we set up these webinars in the future. All right, Tom, do you have the second one loaded up?
Yep, now I'm ready to go for the second piece.
Brilliant.
We're going from romance fantasy to what's described here as science fiction, climate change themed, and this is a piece from The Soul by E.A. Carr, and it begins as follows. Beth feels Dr. Agow's expectant gaze like a physical weight on her shoulders. The pressure makes her anxiety spike. It shouldn't. Dr. Agow's expectations are always clear, but her anxiety isn't rational. Between her mother's steady gaze, Beth's pounding headache, and the harsh fluorescent lights, this morning's practice isn't as productive as it should be. Beth risks a glance up. Even this early in the morning, Dr. Barbara Agow is flawless. Her brown hair is pulled back into an exquisitely tight bun. Her red lipstick is sharply lined, and her lab coat is starchily pressed to perfection. Even the sound of her short, rounded nails tapping on the back of her tablet is in perfect time. The doctor raises her plucked eyebrow a fraction of an inch when she sees Beth looking up at her. Chastised, she turns her attention back to the task at hand. Freeze the water. It's the same task they have been working on all month. Their first few attempts had seen little progress. That's how the doctor had put it, her disappointment hidden behind a neutral tone, but very obvious. You are making very little progress, one. We will resume our attempts tomorrow morning. Her assessment had stung, but Beth had to agree with her. Numbers don't lie. The projections clearly indicate her propensity for actively changing the state of the liquid in front of her, so they will see it done. After all, Dr. Agow had helped to learn hydromanipulation. Surely cryogenesis can't be that difficult. And it was just yesterday that she had formed a thin film of slush over the surface of the water in the pan. It had been a promising sign, and Dr. Agow had concluded the session early as a reward. But that was yesterday. Today her schedule had started even earlier, and her assignment had increased in difficulty. Today she's to freeze the entire pan all the way through. Concentrate, the doctor commands. The familiar authority in her voice gives Beth the confidence she needs to. I can do this. She stretches out her hand, fingers spreading out as she glares at the pan in front of her. Frost extends from the palm of her hand and spreads across the pan, just like it did yesterday. The cameras trained on her were as their lenses zoom in. Dr. Agao herself takes a deliberate step forward. It is clear that she is watching, and Beth is determined not to disappoint. She curls her fingers into hooked claws, forcing her abilities to obey. Incredibly, the water responds. A shining white colour slowly spreads throughout the entire pan as the water thickens and hardens into solid ice. For a moment, time seems to slow down as Beth stares at the pan of ice below her hand. We did it. Okay, so this is quite a different piece to the first one. Again, we have our kind of central protagonist who's kind of set up in this particular scene. It's described, this piece, as kind of science fiction, climate change themed. I think that climate change theme is a really important one in fiction, and that's perhaps something we might talk about in a minute. I don't think there's as much of that in this opening as I would like, but maybe that's just where this opening is set up, and actually that will kind of unfurl as the pages go on. I think the two things I would say that are missing, that I wanted more of in this scene, are firstly action, and again, as I was saying a moment ago, a little bit more setting. I think when we get to the end of the section here, hang on a second, excuse me. When we get to the end of the section here, this is actually a really nice piece of action writing, and I sometimes find that with new writers, there's a focus on description, there's a focus on dialogue, but that element of action, of characters doing something, is not brought out as much as it could. And I think here, for the scene and for the story, this detail is really, really important. So I really like the action that is here, but I would want more of it. I think you can write this out in more detail. There's a fantastic quote from Lee Child where he talks about writing the fast stuff slow and the slow stuff fast. And I think this is a bit where it's the fast stuff that you need to write slower and really kind of engage the reader in terms of what's going on. Setting as well, I think is really, really important. We know we're in some kind of laboratory here. We've got details, little bits like the cameras and the fluorescent lights, but it's very much left to ourselves to imagine what the whole looks like, I think. And although we get detail a little bit about Dr. Barbara Agao and how she looks, we're not going very much about Beth in this opening scene, particularly. So possibly a touch more of that there would be useful as well. And just in terms of when, I think is really, really crucial as well. If this is science fiction, how far into the future is this set, and can you give some detail or flavour or feeling about that as well? So I think that little sprinkling throughout would be kind of really useful to bring in to the piece. A couple of other things that I think are really, really important as well. There's little bits of repetition here that could certainly be taken out. So repeats of words like gaze here. We're slightly wary of characters doing too much looking in a scene. I think action, as I was saying, is having that doing element is really useful to kind of help the piece come alive. When characters are doing too much looking, it feels like everyone's a little bit observational and passive rather than active. And particularly here at the start, I think just a little bit more movement in the piece I think would be good. Body language and imagery is really important, but here I think this could be just a little bit stronger. This idea of her gaze like a physical weight on her shoulders, I think is quite a familiar image. I think something stronger could probably kind of be come in there. And in a similar way, the Doctor raises her plucked eyebrow a fraction of an inch. I have a personal slight problem with characters who raise eyebrows. I once did a piece about E.L. James's 50 Shades of Grey, and if you go through that book, the characters are raising their eyebrows the entire time. And so my rule with eyebrows is you've got one pair of eyebrows, so you can have your characters raise their eyebrows twice in a text, and that's it. So just be careful kind of using that as well. I think, the idea is right to have these little bits of body language in there and that detail, but I think that could be a little bit fresher. There's little bits of information here that I wanted a little bit more clarity over. So in this second paragraph, we've got Dr. Agao's expectations are always clear. And then we talk about her mother's steady gaze, so I'm assuming from that that her mother is Dr. Ago, but that's not completely clear in the piece. So that confused a little bit. And similarly, we have this detail about, even early in the morning, Dr. Barbara Ago is flawless. And then when we go down the page, we have this detail about it's a time task they've been working on all month. And we have this detail from the doctor saying, you're making little progress. We'll resume our attempts tomorrow morning. And then we have down here, and then just yesterday she'd formed a thin film of slush over the surface of the water in the pan. So here I'm slightly unclear if this detail here is the previous morning or not. So little bits like this, they sort of trip the reader up if things aren't completely clear in the text. So I'd be careful with those. And on a similar theme, anytime you're finding a character or the words like clear or obvious in the text, those should really come out. So here, her disappointment hidden behind a neutral tone, but very obvious. If it's very obvious, you shouldn't need to be telling the reader that detail. You should be able to find a way of kind of bringing that out. And yeah, as I say, I think this detail about freezing the water, what the story is, how this links to the bigger picture, I think is very, very important to bring out. But I think that there's a lot going on in here. There's some really interesting ideas, and I think probably it just needs fleshing out a little bit more. I would say to bring out the story, bring out the action, bring out the setting, and bring out the overall kind of theme underneath the piece. But there's a lot in here, and as I say, I think writing about climate change, a little bit like kind of romantasy as well. These are really kind of hot kind of writing topics. So you're writing in exactly the right area that will get people interested. But yeah, just think about adding that extra little bit into the mix. I think will really help kind of bring this fully to life.
Folks in the comments have been sharing their overused action beat. I think a lot of folks who do shrugging, who laugh. I think everyone's got their personal tics that make their
Yeah.
way in.
I think a really good technique I find is when you do that kind of find all. So you can do, I've done that before with, I had one book that I was editing, but it was a real dark thriller, and the characters were like smiling the whole time. And so we did this search on and just found hundreds of smiles, and then got the author to take them out. I said, your character's too cheery. You need to kind of take these out. But yes, I think nods and shakes of the head. We do a session on the course on body language, and actually we do one with objects as well. I think quite often finding giving the character something to do with their hands actually is really useful. So whether it's, the classic one is smoking a cigarette or having a cup of coffee or something, something to make it just a little bit different, finding a different way of using using the actions to express the emotion rather than just kind of, not nodding and shaking the head and raising the eyebrows. And the other two I hate, eyes rolling and people who throw smiles as well. I always see that kind of literally, that you're sort of taking the smile and chucking it across the room. That's one I would try and avoid.
Do you think that's the platonic version of blowing a kiss? Is you start chucking smiles about?
I guess so, but yeah, it always reads strangely to me. It's an odd phrase. I mean, it's not easy body language, but it's something that's worth investigating and experimenting with and getting right. I once read a book by a guy who works for the FBI, and it was a fascinating book. But he described how they would had these lessons in body language so they could work out tells of people whether they were lying or not, and it was really interesting. Just the little details you got out of that book, that you didn't kind of realize otherwise. There was a lot of stuff with necks, for example, about people touching necks and this kind of stuff, which is just a slightly subtler way of doing it. And I think even if the reader doesn't immediately consciously pick up what that piece of body language says, I think subconsciously you do sort of work out what it means. So it's really useful to kind of get in there, and to get it different and distinct and fresh. And as I say, keep an eye on those raised eyebrows in particular. That is a pet hate of mine. I should say.
So I mentioned before that these live editing sessions are run quite regularly as part of the novel writing course that you run. But you also have your masterclasses every Monday where you have guests on to speak. Who are some of the recent ones that you've had on there?
We tried to have a real mix across the genres. So last night I had a thriller writer called Dugald Bruce Lockhart, whose second novel, Second Skin, has just come out. Before him, we had a Nordic noir writer called Heidi Amsenk. We've had Femi Coyote, amazing writer whose second novel has just been shortlisted for the Crime Writers Association. Dagger, Julia Boggio, kind of romantic writer, Claire Fuller, who won the Costa Prize with one of her novels. And next Monday, I'm really excited. We've got a writer called Kelly Garrett, whose new novel, got it here actually, Missing White Woman, has just come out and is one of, I think it's both Apple Books and Amazon kind of pick for May. So she's a really exciting writer who's, at the top of the game. So we get good, interesting writers, and we have a full hour to discuss their work, discuss their writing, discuss their techniques. So really, really good, a good hour, and you've got the opportunity as the students to kind of ask questions as well. So it's a really fun part of the course for me.
Nice. Well, we're going to talk a bit more about the course and this next class starting in our next break. But are we ready for our next edit?
We are. We are going to. We're going to go back in time for this next one with a piece of historical fiction, and this is a piece called The Breweress, by Cecilia Betzel. I'd always found mugwort to be an exceptional plant. Unassuming and ever prevalent, it held a multitude of useful properties. That evening, in the balmy end of summer twilight, I was collecting it for my ale, but it came in handy for treating a number of ailments, from an unpredictable cycle to troubles of the stomach. It could even be used to induce prophetic dreams and visions, something I knew and had been taught but did not advertise. When it came to brewing, mugwort was an effective preservative and lent my ale a pleasant, woodsy taste that the townsfolk praised. My basket was overflowing with the leafy stems by the time I began to wander back home, taking my time weaving through the trees and letting the newly risen full moon guide me. No wonder the village folk called me a witch, I thought, foraging as I was for healing herbs in woods under moonlight. But my salves and potions worked, and my ale tasted damn good too, so perhaps they weren't wrong. Lost in my thoughts and lulled by the murmuration of the forest, I cursed loudly when an errant root caught my toe. The carefully collected mugwort spilled out of my basket, and I bent down to gather it, scolding myself for getting lost in daydreams again. In the moonlight, it was hard to tell, but at first I thought the root was covered in red peat moss, and then I realised that the root was not a root at all, but an arm bathed in blood. Clad in rough brown wool, it was no surprise I thought it part of the underbush. I pushed aside the hawthorn bush in front of me to reveal a man, splayed across the ground, torso leaning heavily on the trunk of the oak tree that had just been stepping round. A cap was pulled down over his face, and his arm was bent at an unnatural angle. I leaned in close and brought the palm of my hand up to his mouth. Hot breath met my skin. Alive then. I stood for a minute, staring down at the prone man beneath me. An owl hooted nearby. I would go home, I thought, pour myself some ale, go to bed, and pretend I never saw him. I wouldn't feel too guilty. Empathy was never my strong suit, and we live in a cruel world besides. He could also be a marauder, a thief, stealing through the woods at night. If that were the case, then I would be doing the village a favour by leaving him here to die. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and while I was stronger than my size might suggest, there was no way I would be able to drag him back to my cottage. No, I would have to go home, get the handcart from the garden, trudge back and attempt to manoeuvre the body back home. Okay, this is, I think this is a really strong piece of writing, actually. There's a lot of detail and a lot of description in here. I think one of the things to mention off from the top is the use of paragraphs. So I was saying in that first piece earlier on how the piece started with short paragraphs and they got longer and longer. Here, by contrast, the paragraphs are all kind of longer in length, so rather than being a couple of lines long, they're all relatively kind of meaty. But not overlong by any stretch of the imagination, and that's true with one exception, which is this line here. So this, I think, is a really good example of how to use a single sentence paragraph. This works as a really strong technique for emphasis. It really stands out, but it stands out because of what has come before and afterwards. So the setup and the build to that is absolutely crucial, and as a result, that line stands out. So technically, I think this is done really well. I'm not 100% sure that's the right line to kind of stick out. It almost feels a little bit throwaway, alive then, because you've got this detail here about hot breath met my skin. That's the moment where, we have this realization this person is still alive. So I almost wonder whether that should come in here, and that should either have that there by itself, or have those two short sentences together just as a kind of short paragraph. But I think the technique and the structure works kind of really, really well. I think there's some lovely detail here in terms of description. It's not completely clear where we are. We know we're in some kind of wood of some kind. We have this nice detail and the specifics and the focus in the beginning around mugwort. I think, interestingly, there's this word unassuming here in the second sentence, unassuming, ever prevalent. This is quite an unassuming beginning, actually. It's one that lulls the reader, I think, a little bit into a kind of false sense of security. So we have little details about what it's used for. So, there's things here like prophetic dreams and visions. No wonder the village folk called me a witch. There's some nice little drops of hints in here. I think probably that the author could make this just a little bit darker and a little bit more kind of moody, perhaps. It's a slow burn in the way in. And in fact, where we have the detail, where we have the reveal of the body, it is buried halfway through this second paragraph. If that had been at the beginning of the paragraph, if that had been as a kind of standout, single sentence paragraph, it would have had a lot more impact. So actually, I wondered whether that is lost just a little bit. This detail here, the arm bathed in blood, that I think needs to stand out a little bit more. And I think one of the reasons that it doesn't do it as much as it could do, perhaps, is the reaction of the protagonist. I mentioned with one of the pieces earlier the importance of having emotion in there, and I think there's a real difference when you're writing between a character thinking and a character feeling. So we're in first person here, so you're able to get into these characters' thoughts. I thought the root was covered in red peat moss, but it's quite thoughtful. It's quite rational what's going on here. Then I realised the root was not at all but an arm bathed in blood, clad in rough brown. It was no surprise. I thought it part of the underbush. She's quite relaxed. Not relaxed isn't quite the right word, but she's not surprised or shocked or scared about finding this person alive. It's all quite a little bit too matter of the fact for me. And maybe, we're looking at the number of times here that the character's saying, I thought here, if that were the case, he could be. It's all quite rational and thinking through. It's sort of, she's too small to kind of carry him through. No, I would have to go home. It's a little bit too thoughtful for me. I think a little bit more in the way of emotion needs to come out. Is she scared of the villagers? Is she scared of this guy? Bringing that emotion out, I think will just kind of warm things up just a little bit in the mix. And I did wonder on reading through whether, as I was saying, whether this is the right moment to have this detail in there, whether actually that should come in the first paragraph. This is the moment where things happen. So she discovers this body after she's finished picking the mugwort. If actually she finds him while she is picking it, that would just pull these two little details together a little bit more. But there's lots of kind of really nice details in here that I really like. So, for example, the pleasant woodsy taste of the ale, I think, is really strong. The arm bathed in blood, cast in rough brown wool. There's some nice details and nice specifics in here. And it's not difficult, complicated language. It's all quite kind of straightforward language that might partly be to do with a particular character who's speaking and talking. But it means that there's a it's clear in writing, and actually when you do have kind of longer words like kind of murmuration. Where was that there? Lulled by the murmuration of the forest. That pops out a little bit, and I did pause over that word of murmuration. I mean, I think technically it's. I say technically it is correct. So murmuration can be, murmuring, but your normal association with it, what I associate with, is birds in flight and the group together. So it felt a slightly odd word, and that tripped up. Or trip me up as a reader just a little bit. So thinking about your verb and your word choice is kind of really, really important going through. And then the other point I wanted to make is just at the very end. And we have this detail where she's standing, kind of watching this guy, debating what to do. Decides, he could be a thief, he could be a marauder. If that were the case, I would be doing the village a favour by leaving her here to die. Then she says, he's too tall. She can't kind of carry him or drag him back. And then in this last paragraph, the last sentence of this last paragraph, she then seems to change her mind and said actually is going to take him. But where that has come from is not immediately clear. So I think a little bit more work is done to kind of bring this round to that particular point. But really, I think this is a really strong beginning to the story, Cecilia, if you're here. And I think there's just a little bit of tweaking, kind of story-wise and detail-wise, but the language I really, really like, and I think this is a really strong start to a novel.
Yeah, I'd read that. Yeah, I remember reading somewhere that I think a lot of the imagery and symbols around witchcraft do derive from the old alewives and brewing. So I'm guessing that's sort of the direction that this might be going in.
I think so, and it's a good title. I mean, it's it's a good I think sort of fertile ground that's slightly kind of semi-gothic and almost kind of semi-horror kind of historical fiction, with a little bit of magic or a bit of spookiness in there. I think it's a really good thing to kind of pull off. So yeah, I loved it. I thought it was very strong writing.
Nice. Yeah, so I guess this is a lovely time to perhaps talk a bit about the course and the term that is starting on Monday. I believe, Tom, will you have a coupon code to share?
I believe we do, yes. So the course starts on May the 20th. So we thought it appropriate to give 20% off, and the code May 20. So you can work out what the discount is and when the start date is as well. I suppose financially it's good we're not starting on May the 30th, otherwise we have to be giving away a little bit more money off the course. But yeah, it's the latest cohort beginning. We've had 3 courses start this year. So we've had a group began in January that have finished recently, a group in February who are coming towards the end of the course, and a group who began in April as well. And all those courses come together for the live sessions on a Monday, but otherwise they're working through the course in their groups and kind of sharing and feedbacking with each other within their cohort. So yeah, so it's a really exciting course. And what's been interesting with the group who just finished in January is how many of that group have done what we wanted them set out to do and finished their draft either by the end of the course, or I've been getting emails in the last couple of weeks of writers coming back and saying, I was just a little bit off, but I have now finished the first drafts of the novel, and I'm kind of really excited. And that's what we want the course to do. There's a lot of teaching in there, but equally there's a lot of space. We want you to come away hopefully with a full first draft well on the way by the end of the course, and that's what the teaching and the setup and the groups and the community is designed to help you achieve. So yeah, there's a code there if you're interested, and we'd love to have you with us next week.
Yep, and if you're looking to get there, the link and the code are both in the video description. I don't know whether that's below or to the right-hand side, or if you're using the app somewhere buried in there. But yeah, just click through, and if you sign up now, you can get 20% off the class starting next week, which I think comes up to like $250, I think. So yeah, well worth it. I've been doing the course, and I've been very much enjoying it, and feeling quite guilty that I'm not doing actually writing my draft. But yes, the code May 20. All the details again in the description there. Do sign up. And I believe, Tom, we have one more extract we're going to edit.
We've got it's a rom-com by Amanda Cox called Strange Inheritance, and she describes it as it's aimed at professional women in their late 20s plus. So beyond that, and I should say there are a couple of swear words in the piece. So if you're offended by that, I do apologise in advance. Okay, this piece begins as follows. Lenora was in the middle of a fictional argument with Ford, yelling at the steering wheel what she wanted to yell at his stupid, smug, fiancé-dumping face, so she didn't see the blue car type pulling out of a side street until she crunched into the bumper at about 20 miles per hour. Her airbag shot out of the steering wheel, silenced her mid-argument, just as she was getting to the juicy parts. God damn it! The airbag deflated, its damage already done to her sunglasses and her already fragile pride and grip on sanity. She flung the door open, ready to throw a punch at the idiot who pulled out in front of her. Her broken sunglasses hung off one ear, and she swatted them to the side of the road, marched up to the blue car and its idiot driver, and then the door opened. And out stepped a man. A gorgeous man. An infuriatingly calm and, yes, unhurt, gorgeous man. But rather than turn to Lenora in fury, he turned to her with a smile. A goddamn smile. It made Lenora want to punch him even more, though it was probably the nicest smile she'd ever seen in years. Certainly the nicest smile she'd seen in the last 48 hours. She shook the feeling off, and the fury boiled back into her throat, forcing the words out. What the... Are you blind? The man blinked in surprise, the smile fading from his face. I'm glad you're not hurt. Oh, I'm fine. Perfectly fine. Peachy dandy, in fact. Best day of my fucking life. Lenora took a deep breath, then forced herself to relax. Okay, I'm sorry too, and I'm also glad you aren't hurt. Are you sure? He asked. It didn't seem like that a second ago. Lenora exhaled sharply. Just accept the apology. I don't have time to make nice with every cute guy in the world. He smiled brilliantly. You think I'm cute? What? No. Why would you even ask me that? You just caused an accident. But you said, look, is there any damage to your car? Because mine looks fine and I would really like to get to work now. Oh, yeah, it looks fine, I guess. Do you want to take my insurance information just in case? No. Lenora turned back to get in her car, waving her hand dismissively. No, I don't need your insurance information or anything at all from you. I just need to get to work. Have a good day then. The man stood beside his car and watched Lenora climb into hers, slam the door with more ferocity than was perhaps necessary, and floor it back onto the road. After checking for any of the people driving like idiots, naturally. He was still watching her as she drove away, at least until she could no longer see him in the rear view mirror. Okay, hopefully I've done that justice, because I think this is good fun. And actually, the first time I read it through to select for tonight, it did make me kind of laugh out loud. I think there's some really good funny moments in there, and I know that because I've written kind of yes, well, I suppose I've written rom-com myself. Writing comedies, one of those arts in writing that is really, really difficult to pull off. So, you know, it's sometimes a little bit underappreciated in writing, but it's a really good skill to have. And I think that Amanda here has done this kind of extremely well. I'm just going to start briefly on the end here, because there's just a little question at the close before I go back to start about the points of view. So we're very much with Lenora's kind of viewpoint throughout, but it just shifts a little bit in this final paragraph. So having had this discussion, she gets back in the car. It shifts across here. The man stood beside his car and watched Lenora climb into hers. After checking, you know, for any of the people driving, it's naturally, he was still watching her as she drove away, at least until she could no longer see him in the rearview mirror. So here in this paragraph, we've shifted viewpoint, and I just would caution against that. I think, as a general rule, you decide on your viewpoint, not necessarily for the whole book, but for a scene, and you stick to it. If you switch just within a scene, that trips the reader up a little bit. So one thing I would say about this scene as a moment is this needs to be rewritten, and I think that's easy enough to do. You can do it with kind of her looking in the mirror and seeing him stood there, rather than him stood there kind of watching her. It's just that other flip round, just to keep it within Lenora's viewpoint. I think is kind of really, really important, particularly in an opening scene. If you want to switch to this other person's viewpoint, then you need to have like a section break or something and then move it across. But to switch within a scene, I would be wary of and cautious against a little bit. Lots of good stuff in here, and we have this lovely detail at the start with the car accident and the crash. I would say in a funny kind of way that this opening paragraph, that first sentence is too long and that first paragraph is too short. So I mean, you possibly sort of heard it as I was reading it, that there's a lot of information given to the reader in that opening sentence to unpack. Lenora was in the middle of a fictional argument with Ford, yelling at the steering wheel what she wanted to yell at, his stupid, smug fiancé dumping face. That, as I'm reading it, feels quite a lot to say. So she didn't see the blue car type pulling out of a side street until she crunched into the bumper at about 20 miles per hour. I think that there's too much going on in that. As I was reading it out, this detail is lovely. The stupid, smug fiance dumping face, but as I read it, that felt too much. So I would thin that down, or I'd break this down into a couple of paragraphs, a couple of sentences, and actually, this moment where you're getting this detail of, the airbag shot out the steering wheel, silence her mid-argument, just as she gets into the juicy part, and then we have the swear words here, and that feels wrong. If she's just been silenced, that's not the moment where she's then able to say something. I think this would be better if we had just a little bit of her having this fictional argument with Ford, bang, 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 yada, 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 and then boof, the airbag goes off at that point, and we literally see her kind of interrupted kind of mid moment, because actually I think it's really funny as a moment and a scene, but I don't quite think the author's done enough to kind of fully kind of bring that out. But I love this detail about the airbag, and then again with the glasses as well, the damage done to her sunglasses, and she comes out, and they're hanging off one ear. This is all kind of good, strong use of props, use of little bits of detail in the scene. There was a detail last night in the interview I did with this thriller writer, and he's an actor as well. This writer Dougal, he was saying that when you're writing a scene and you're writing character, the phrase or something like you let the situation do the work for you, and then that shows the character rather than worrying about what the character should be doing. And here I think we're getting such a strong sense of who this individual is, that actually we don't need this detail here about her already fragile pride and grip on sanity. I think that's all in there in the mix. You don't need to see that. We've got the grip on sanity with the airbag, and we've got the fragile the fragile pride with sunglasses hanging off from one ear. So that's all in there, so you can take that out. Really, really good dialogue, I have to say. Hats off. So a phrase like this here, as I was saying this, the rhythm, oh, I'm fine, perfectly fine, peachy dandy, in fact, best day of my fucking life. You've got this little build in terms of kind of length. It's getting a little bit longer each time, but each little bit is nice and short. You've got that repetition of that fine, perfectly fine, and then you've got the puh here for perfectly and peachy, which works really well. And you've got dandy and day, and then you've got the one swear word for emphasis, and then life at the end here. So it all builds kind of really, really nicely. There's a lot of technical stuff going on in that little bit, and certainly I would always advise writers to kind of read their dialogue out aloud to get a sense of the feel. I thought as I was reading this that there's a really kind of nice mix in the piece, and a real nice kind of rhythm and flow as the dialogue goes through. And one little point I just wanted to mention on that. Probably if you've heard me talk before, I'm always slightly wary of adverbs, so I probably look at a way of taking those out. But when you have the description before somebody speaks, that acts as a sort of natural pause in the conversation. And so if you have it too much, then it slows the conversation down. So rather than having that nice rhythm of the back and forth of the detail, in fact, what happens is it feels a little bit more stop-start. So here, I would have probably one of these at the most, and possibly if there's a way of having them, in the middle or at the end. I think that's a little bit more effective in keeping the dialogue moving forwards. But we talked a little bit earlier about the demands of different genres, and here I think this is done perfectly with this setup between these two characters. Lenora's left; she hasn't got any details about this guy. I'm I'm not a gambling man, but I would put money on the fact that these two are going to come back together kind of later on in the book, I would say. So yeah, it's a good, strong, punchy beginning. It's bright, it's funny, it's got lots of life in it, and as I say, I think think about those details, but in particular, you use this build here just to really bring out the start, because it's a good, funny moment, but it can be made funny with a little bit more build just to give the piece maximum impact. But yeah, well done, Amanda, and thank you, and thank all the writers this evening for sharing. It's been lovely to be able to go through and hopefully give a little bit of advice and tips on how this works.
Yeah, I think people in the comments have been enjoying this. There was much discussion about whether the car will continue to drive after the airbag had been deployed. So a lot of auto mechanical debate in there. But I think it's a small thing that could probably change in the edit to something else if need be.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing. It's the kind of thing as an author you'll get letters about. So you have to be careful with getting the
Yeah.
details right.
You'll probably be okay going to romance book fairs. If you're going to an auto expo, then maybe you should be gearing up for some conversations.
Auto fiction. Is that the term?
Yeah, auto fiction. Great. Well, Tom, thank you so much for doing this. As we mentioned, again, use the link and the promo code in the description there. What's the final pitch for the course starting Monday? Who should sign up? Who would benefit from your course there?
I think it's really helpful for anyone who's always wanted to write and get that novel down, but has always felt inhibited or haven't had that right amount of sort of pressure's not quite the right word, but you need that little bit of commitment to get it to right. And I think when you're in a group writing with people at the same pace, that gives you that little bit of ownership. You have that kind of peer support, and that kind of helps get it across the line. There was a post from someone in the April group who's been writing away, and he just headed it. This course has made writing fun again. And I think that was such a nice thing to say, that he'd got back into enjoying writing. He'd been writing this book for a while, hadn't been going anywhere, was struggling with it. We'd done a couple of the early weeks on the course where he kind of worked out the structure and the plot and how it clicked together, and he was enjoying it. And I think if I can help people, enjoy their writing and work out why it is they love doing this, then that's money well spent in my book.
Amazing. And speaking of money well spent, there's money well saved. 20% code.
Save too,
20%
yes.
off with our code. Great. Thank you so much, Tom. We'll undoubtedly have another one of these sessions at some point in the future, and I believe we have another special type event planned for the next month. So keep your eye out for that. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in from home, from work, from the road, and I really appreciate anyone who sent in their extract for this one. If we didn't cover it this time, there's a good chance we might pick it next. Well, there's a small chance we'll pick it next time. Please do send it in anyway. Well, Tom, I'll see you in the office. Catch you later.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Bye. Has this broadcast not ended yet? I'm having trouble closing it down. Let me try again.